There was a time when one African city stunned the world. A city so wealthy, so powerful, so advanced, that travelers from across the globe could hardly believe what they saw. And at its peak, this African city was larger than London. This is the story of Timbuktu. Today, Timbuktu sits quietly on the edge of the Sahara Desert in the modern nation of Mali. But centuries ago, it was one of the greatest cities on earth, a center of wealth, a center of knowledge, a center of global trade. In the 14th and 15th centuries, Timbuktu was part of the powerful Mali Empire, an empire so rich that its rulers controlled the flow of gold across much of the known world. Caravans traveled for months across the Sahara, hundreds of camels loaded with gold, salt, books, and ideas. And many of those caravans ended their journey in Timbuktu. But Timbuktu was not just rich. It was intellectual. Scholars gathered here. Students traveled from distant lands to study in its famous schools. The most famous of them was the Sankore University, Sankore Mosque. At its height, Sankore attracted thousands of students. They studied mathematics, astronomy, medicine, law, theology, and philosophy. Some historians estimate that Timbuktu may have had over 25,000 students in a city of roughly 100,000 people. Think about that for a moment. Nearly a quarter of the city was devoted to learning. At the same time, many European cities were far smaller. In the 1300s, London's population may have been around 50,000 people. But Timbuktu was nearly twice that size, and it was thriving in the heart of Africa. Books were incredibly valuable in Timbuktu. In fact, books were sometimes worth more than gold. Families built private libraries. Scholars wrote manuscripts on science, law, medicine, and philosophy. Today, historians estimate that hundreds of thousands of these manuscripts once existed in Timbuktu. One of the most famous visitors to Timbuktu was a traveler named Leo Africanus. When he arrived in the 1500s, he described a city filled with scholars. He wrote that the trade in books was one of the most profitable businesses in the city. Imagine that. In a desert city hundreds of years ago, knowledge was one of the most valuable commodities. But Timbuktu's fame spread far beyond Africa. In Europe, stories circulated about a legendary city made of gold, a city of unimaginable wealth. Some people believed Timbuktu was just a myth, a place too extraordinary to be real. But it was real, and it stood as proof that Africa was deeply connected to global trade and scholarship. One of the most famous figures associated with the Mali Empire was the legendary ruler Mansa Musa. Mansa Musa is often considered one of the richest individuals in human history. During his famous pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324, he traveled with thousands of followers and enormous amounts of gold. His wealth shocked the Mediterranean world, and much of that wealth flowed through cities like Timbuktu. But like many great cities in history, Timbuktu eventually faced decline. In the late 1500s, foreign invasions weakened the region. Trade routes began to shift, and over time, the city lost its position as a global center of power. Yet its legacy never disappeared. Even today, the manuscripts of Timbuktu are considered one of the greatest archives of African intellectual history. They reveal something important. Africa was not just a place of trade and kingdoms. It was also a place of scholarship, of scientific thought, of philosophical debate. For centuries, the story of Timbuktu challenges the way history is often told. Because long before modern universities, long before globalized education, there were places like Timbuktu, cities where knowledge traveled as far as gold, where scholars shaped ideas that crossed continents, and where a desert city became one of the brightest intellectual centers in the world. So the next time you hear the name Timbuktu, don't think of a distant, forgotten place. Think of a city that once stood among the greatest on earth. A city larger than London, a city of books, a city of scholars, a city of ideas. Because Africa's history is deeper, richer, and more powerful than most people ever imagine. Subscribe for more Untold African History, because the world is only beginning to read it.